Welcome to Pathophysiology, Part 1. I'm going to start out talking about some terminology here. Well, we were talking about in the last chapter, anatomy and physiology, which is the study of the body's normal structure and function. Disease is an abnormal condition in which the body's steady state homeostasis is threatened or cannot be maintained. Pathology is the study of disease. Pathophysiology is the study of the physical, chemical, and mechanical processes that cause or are caused by disease or injury, producing changes in the structure and function of the body. By understanding the disease processes, you'll better understand the patient's illness and injury, anticipate the patient's need and potential complications of the illness and injuries, and provide appropriate care. Thousands of chemical reactions occur within every cell in the body every second. Cell metabolism is the sum of the chemical reactions that occur within cells, enabling them to maintain a living state. There are two types of cellular metabolism. In anabolism, a cell uses energy to make larger molecules from smaller ones. For example, substances such as amino acids are combined to form enzymes. In catabolism, the cells break down large molecules into smaller ones, releasing energy. For example, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins can be broken down into smaller substances. So remember, anabolism is making large molecules, and catabolism is breaking them down. Cellular respiration is the process whereby energy is released from molecules such as glucose and made available for use by the cells and tissues of the body. The energy that's released is eventually converted into ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is used by the cells throughout the body. The carbon dioxide produced by the cell during the process is removed from the cell and absorbed by the body, by the blood and transported to the lungs. Blood vessels also transport other waste products away from the cell for elimination. Now let's talk about glycolysis. Glycolysis is the breakdown or catabolism of glucose into a usable energy formed by the cells. This is called, again, glycolysis. During the first step of the process, one molecule of glucose is converted into two molecules of pyruvate, which is an acid, which is then converted into two molecules of ATP. Remember, ATP is what energy is made of. This step does not require oxygen. Next we have anaerobic metabolism. Cell metabolism that does not require the presence of oxygen is called anaerobic metabolism. Anaerobic metabolism occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. If oxygen is not available for the next step, pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid, which produces no additional ATP. If oxygen is still not available, lactic acid builds up in body cells and fluids and eventually inhibits glycolysis and ATP production. Lactic acid is toxic and oxygen is needed to break it down. If oxygen becomes available, the liver converts the lactic acid that has moved into the blood back to pyruvic acid, and the process of aerobic metabolism can begin. Remember, we talked about this last chapter. Aerobic metabolism is utilizing oxygen. Anaerobic is without oxygen. Aerobic metabolism is cell metabolism that occurs in the presence of oxygen. If an ample amount of oxygen is available, the pyruvic acid produced by the glycolysis moves into the power plants, which is the mitochondria of the cell. The pyruvic acid is broken down into carbon dioxide and water. In the presence of oxygen, each molecule of pyruvate is converted into 18 molecules of ATP. You recall that at the start of the process, one molecule of glucose was converted into 2 molecules of pyruvate. Therefore, in the presence of oxygen, one glucose molecule will yield a total of 36 molecules of ATP, plus the 2 ATP molecules from the first step in process, for a total of 38 ATP molecules. As you can see, aerobic metabolism is much more efficient than anaerobic metabolism and yields considerably more energy for use by the cells. After a meal, some of the glucose absorbed from the digestive system is used immediately by cells as fuel for energy. However, most of the glucose is stored as glycogen in muscles and the liver, or stored as fat and converted to fuel for energy later. Because glucose is a large molecule, it cannot easily enter the body's cells where it is needed. Insulin, which is a hormone released by the pancreas, helps transport glucose from the blood into cells, including muscles, liver, and fat cells, to be used for energy. Cell reproduction, also called cell division, is necessary for body growth, wound healing, replacement of old, injured, or dead cells. Dead cells are often referred to as necrotic cells. During reproduction, cells begin to differentiate or specialize in one type of function or act with other cells to perform a more complex task. For example, some cells become skin cells, blood-forming cells, cells that line the intestine, or bone cells. Although most cells reproduce as quickly as they die, some cells, such as those in the pancreas, liver, and certain nerve cells in the brain and spinal column, do not reproduce. Cell reproduction that occurs too often or in disorderly fashion results in a tumor, also known as a neoplasm. A tumor is a growth of cells that multiplies without a purpose. A benign tumor is non-cancerous. It usually develops slowly, remains in place like a lump, and may eventually interfere with the function of healthy tissue by compressing nearby tissues or obstructing an organ. However, a malignant tumor is cancerous. As it multiplies, it can invade and extend into surrounding tissue. If not stopped by surgery, radiation, or chemicals, the cancerous cells will eventually reach the circulatory system and be transported by the body and lymph to one or more areas of the body. Metastasis is a word used to describe the spread of cancerous cells from their site of origin to sites elsewhere in the body. You often hear people say their cancer metastasized from one spot in the lung to all over the lung, or both lungs. Most diseases start with an injury to the cell. Although cells have the ability to adapt to their environment to protect themselves from injury, cellular injury can occur if the cell is changed or damaged to the point that normal function is negatively affected or permanently impaired. Free radicals are highly reactive molecules that are a byproduct of many normal cellular reactions within the body, such as the inflammatory process and the breakdown of fats and proteins. An excessive number of free radicals can damage cells and impair the body's ability to fight illnesses. Antioxidants such as vitamin C and E and beta-carotene, a precursor to vitamin A, block the production of free radicals and inactivate them and transform them to non-damaging substances. Now, hypoxia, this is something we deal with quite often, which is the lack of adequate oxygen is the most common cause of cellular death and cellular injury. Cells within the brain, heart, and kidneys are the most rapidly affected by hypoxia, and their high demand for oxygen. Hypoxia deprives the cell of oxygen and interferes with energy, ATP production. It may result from decreased amounts of oxygen in the air, loss of hemoglobin or hemoglobin function, decreased production of red blood cells, poisoning of substances within the cells, or disease of the respiratory or cardiovascular system. Ischemia, which is a reduced blood supply, is the most common cause of hypoxia. Ischemia often affects blood flow to specific vessels, producing localized tissue injury. Pain or discomfort is often accompanies ischemia, serving as a warning that a part of the body is not receiving an adequate supply of oxygen. Prolonged ischemia results in cellular injury. If the cause of the ischemia is not reversed and blood flow restored to the affected area, ischemia may lead to cellular injury and ultimately cellular death, known as necrosis. Injured cells have been cut off from or experienced a severe reduction in their blood and oxygen supply. Death of tissue due to ischemia is called an infarct. We have come to the end of Pathophysiology Part 1 in our 3-part series.